Sequels, are they good? We always hope so. Well, tonight I have one that fits in and fulfills the hopes. So join me for Book Bites with the Booklady. Hi everybody, it's Gretchen again with Book Bites with the Booklady for Nodpod Pomo. This is day 24, and tonight I have a historical fiction novel. It's a sequel. It came out 10 years, probably about 10 years after the original. The original was written by Patricia McLaughlin and came out and won the Newbery Award in 1986. And that book was called Sarah Plain and Tall. Wonderful historical novel and just kind of written in letter form. And it was really a great book to read, and it had such a richness to us. So when the sequel came out, Skylark, it was always like, ooh, I wonder. Well, Patricia McLaughlin did not disappoint. Of course, I must insert here that Patricia McLaughlin rarely, if ever, disappointed. All the Places to Love is one of my favorite books, picture books of hers, but so many of her chapter books and picture books are just absolute treasures to read. So I'm bringing you one of those treasures, and the book is called Skylark by Patricia McLaughlin. It's the sequel to Sarah Plain and Tall. Skylark. Papa married Sarah on a summer day. There were no clouds in the sky, and Papa picked Sarah up in his arms and whirled her around and around, her white dress and veil surrounding them like a summer wind. Caleb was so excited and happy, he burst into tears. Everybody was happy. Chapter 1. Stand on that stump, Caleb. Anna, you next him. That will be a good family picture. Joshua, the photographer, looked through his big camera at us as we stood on the porch squinting in the sunlight. Caleb wore a white shirt, his hair combed slick to his head. Sarah in a white dress, Papa looking hot and uneasy in his suit. We had to be still for so long that Caleb began to whistle softly, making Sarah smile. Far off in the distance, the dogs, Nick and Lottie, walked slowly through the dry prairie grass. They walked past the cow pond, nearly empty of water, past the wagon, past the chickens in the yard. Nick saw us first, then Lottie, and they began to run. Caleb looked sideways at me as they jumped the fence and ran to us, running up to stand between Sarah and Papa as if they wanted to be in the picture, too. We tried not to laugh, but Sarah couldn't help it. She looked up at Papa and he smiled down at her. And Joshua took the picture of us all laughing, Papa smiling at Sarah. Joshua laughed, too. Your aunts will like that picture, he said to Sarah. Sarah fanned herself. They hardly know what I look like anymore, she said softly. I hardly know what they look like anymore. I looked at Caleb. I knew Caleb didn't like to think about Sarah and her aunts and her brother and the sea she had left behind. It's Maine you came from, isn't it? Said Joshua. Yes, said Sarah. She lives here now, said Caleb loudly. Papa put his hand on Caleb's head. That she does, said Joshua, smiling. He turned and looked out over the cornfield, the plants so dry they rattled in the wind. But I bet Maine is green, Joshua said in a low voice, and he looked out over the land with a faraway look as if he were somewhere else. We sure could use rain. I remember a long time ago, you remember it, Jacob. The water dried up, the fields so dry that the leaves fell like dust, and then the winds came. My grandfather packed up his family and left." "Did he come back?" asked Caleb. Joshua turned. "No," he said. "He never came back." Joshua packed up the last of his things and got up in his wagon. Papa looked at Sarah. "It will rain," he said. We watched the wagon go off down the road. "It will rain," Papa repeated softly. "Will you worry if it doesn't rain?" asked Caleb. "Yes, but we'll get along," said Papa. "We always get along." "Imagine having to leave," said Sarah. Papa took off his jacket. "We'd never leave, Sarah," he said. "We were born here. Our names are written in this land." When Papa and Sarah went inside, Caleb looked at me. I knew what he was going to say, and I didn't want to hear it. "Sarah wasn't born here," he said. I picked up the pail of grain for the chickens. "I know that, Caleb," I said crossly. "Papa knows it too." Caleb took a stick and bent down in the dirt. I watched him write Sarah. He looked up at me. "I'm writing Sarah's name in the land," he said. "You can't even spell, Caleb," I said. "You can't." I walked away, and when I turned to look at Caleb, he was staring at me. I wanted to say I was sorry for being cross with him, but I didn't. "Happily ever after," said Caleb when Papa and Sarah married. "Now we'll live happily ever after. That's what the stories say." Caleb said that all through the summer and the fall, when the prairie grasses turned yellow, and through the first winters Papa and Sarah were married. He said it all winter long when the wind blew around the corners of the house and the ice sat slick on the windows. He said it when he fell through the ice on the slough and had to sit in a warm tub of water, his teeth chattering. "I like the sound of it," Caleb told me. "Happily ever after." Chapter 2. The days grew hotter, the sun beating down on us. We stayed inside as much as we could. Even Nick and Lottie stayed inside, stretched out on the wood floor to keep cool. Papa walked the fields, measuring the level of the water in the well over and over, waiting for rain. He came in, bringing the dirt with him. "Papa," I poked at his feet with my broom, "your boots!" I was sweeping, trying to keep the dust out, and Sarah was scrubbing the kitchen floor on her hands and knees. Papa was hot and tired. "That may be the last washing for the floor," he said to Sarah. "We have to save water." "That's a mixed blessing," Sarah said, brushing the hair off her face, and she watched Caleb feed Seal. "Don't feed her too much, Caleb," said Sarah. "She's getting fat with your food." Papa looked closely at Seal. I think she's more than fat, Sarah." Sarah looked up. "What? What does he mean?" asked Caleb. I smiled. "Kittens! He means kittens, Caleb," I said. Caleb and I spoke at the same time. "Can we keep them all?" "When will she have them, Papa?" asked Caleb, excited. "Don't know, Caleb," said Papa, drinking water from the tin cup. Sarah sat back. "Has she ever had kittens before, Sarah?" asked Papa. Sarah shook her head. "No, never." Papa smiled at Sarah's look. She stared at Seal for a long time. "Kittens," she said, her face suddenly breaking into a smile. "Kittens." Late light fell across the bedroom. The windows closed to the prairie wind. I held Sarah's wedding dress up to me and looked in the mirror. "Anna?" I jumped, startled, and Sarah smiled at me. "I didn't mean to frighten you," she said. I looked in the mirror again. "Someday I'll marry and move to my husband's land. That's what Papa says." "Oh, he does he?" said Sarah. "That's what you did, Sarah. You came from Maine to marry Papa," I told her. Sarah was silent for a moment. She sat on the bed. "Yes," she said slowly, "I guess I did." You fell in love with us, said Caleb in the doorway. I did that, she said. First your letters, then you. Did you fall in love with Papa's letters too, before you knew him? Asked Caleb. I sat on the bed and watched Sarah's face as she remembered. Yes, I loved your Papa's letters, said Sarah softly. I loved what he was between the lines most. What was between the lines? Caleb asked. Sarah looked at me when she answered. His life, she said simply. That was what was between the lines. Papa's not always good with words, I said. Sometimes, yes, said Sarah laughing, but when I read your Papa's letters, I could see his farm and the animals and the sky and you. Sometimes what people choose to write down on paper is more important than what they say. Caleb didn't know what Sarah meant, but I knew. I wrote in my journal every night, and when I read what I had written, I could see myself there, clearer than when I looked into the mirror. I could see all of us. Papa, who couldn't always say the things he felt. Caleb, who said everything. And Sarah, who didn't know that she had changed us all. Yeah. Skylark, Patricia McLaughlin's successful sequel to Sarah Plain and Tall. It's a short one. It's only about 88 pages or so. But it's a wonderful, beautiful historical novel about that time and when, the letters were sent, the people came to meet someone, to start a new life, and the struggles that they went through in building that family. That's my book bites for today. Skylark by Patricia McLaughlin. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you'll pick it up and maybe you'll go back and read Sarah Plain and Tall. Maybe Caleb, too. There's a book called Caleb that's in the series. But for now, that's it for today's Book Bites with the Booklady for Nodpod Pomo, day 24. And until next time, everyone, keep looking for the beauty hidden in plain sight. It's all around you. But the first place you'll find it is when you go look in the mirror. And I'll see you next time.